You don't notice it at first. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like confusion. One moment you're sure about something, your feelings, your decisions, your boundaries. And the next, you're second-guessing everything. You start asking yourself questions you never used to ask. Am I overreacting? Did I misunderstand? Maybe it's actually my fault. And that's where it begins. Not with force, not with obvious control, but with something far more dangerous. Subtle influence that slowly rewires how you think. The truth is, manipulation rarely looks like manipulation. It hides behind kindness, concern, even love. It doesn't demand control, and it earns it. Piece by piece, until you don't even realize it's happening. And by the time you do, it already feels normal. But once you see the patterns, once you understand what's really happening beneath the surface, you can never unsee it, and that changes everything. Before we go deeper, I want to be clear. Everything discussed on this channel is strictly for educational purposes. Understanding dark psychology is about building awareness, not weaponizing it. If you or someone you know is in a harmful situation, please seek support from a licensed professional. This is a space for growth, clarity, and protection. Nothing else. There's a form of influence that doesn't rely on authority, power, or direct control. It operates quietly, psychologically. This is what we call hidden manipulation, a pattern of behavior where someone subtly shapes your thoughts, emotions, and decisions without your full awareness. And the reason it's so effective is because it doesn't feel like manipulation. Imagine this. You're in a conversation with someone close to you. You express a concern, something that genuinely bothered you. Instead of addressing it, they shift the focus. Suddenly, you're the one being questioned. Your tone, your memory, your intention. By the end of the conversation, your original concern disappears, and now you're apologizing. This isn't accidental. This is a pattern, and it shows up everywhere. In relationships, friendships, workplaces, even family dynamics. The danger isn't just what they do, it's what it slowly does to you. Your confidence fades, your clarity weakens, your sense of reality begins to blur. That's why understanding these signs matters, because the moment you recognize the pattern, you take back control. Layer 1, the subtle shift of reality. The first layer of manipulation is distortion. Not obvious lies, but small strategic shifts in how reality is presented. Someone might deny things they clearly said, or they may twist events just enough to make you doubt your memory. At first it seems harmless, maybe even forgetful, but over time something changes. You stop trusting your own perception. For example, imagine someone promises something important. Later, when you bring it up, they say, "I never said that." You're certain they did, but their confidence makes you hesitate. So instead of standing firm, you question yourself. And that's the goal. Because once you start doubting your own reality, you become easier to influence. This matters because your perception is your foundation. When that's unstable, everything else becomes easier to control. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Layer 2, emotional conditioning. Manipulation isn't just about what you think, it's about what you feel. In this layer, emotions become the control mechanism. You're rewarded when you comply. You're punished when you resist. Not always directly, but subtly. For example, when you agree with them, they become warm, kind, supportive. But the moment you challenge them, their energy shifts. They become distant, cold, disapproving. This creates a psychological pattern. You begin to associate agreement with safety, and disagreement with discomfort. So what happens next? You start adjusting your behavior, not because you want to, but because you want to avoid that negative emotional response. Over time, this becomes automatic.
You don't even realize you're being shaped.
Most people stop here, but you need to know the next layer. Layer 3, identity erosion. This is where manipulation becomes deeply personal. It's no longer about specific situations. It's about who you believe you are. The manipulator begins to subtly redefine your identity. They may label you as too sensitive, one overthinking, or difficult. At first you reject it, but after hearing it repeatedly, especially during emotional moments, it starts to sink in. And once it does, everything changes. Because now, you're not just questioning situations, you're questioning yourself. For example, instead of thinking that felt wrong, you start thinking, maybe I'm just overreacting. That shift is powerful, Because when your identity becomes uncertain, your ability to stand your ground disappears. And that's the deepest level of control. Not controlling what you do, but controlling how you see yourself. Here's the part most people never realize. Manipulation doesn't always come from malicious intent. Sometimes it comes from patterns, learned behaviors, insecurity, fear of losing control. And that's what makes it even harder to detect. Because when someone isn't openly bad, you don't expect manipulation. You justify it, you excuse it, you tolerate it, but the impact remains the same. Your clarity weakens, your boundaries fade, your sense of self slowly shifts. The truth is, manipulation isn't defined by intention, it's defined by effect. If someone's behavior consistently leaves you confused, diminished, or unsure of yourself, that's a pattern worth recognizing. And here's the deeper insight. The more empathetic you are, the more vulnerable you can become to these patterns. Because you try to understand them. You give the benefit of the doubt. You look for reasons instead of recognizing reality. But awareness changes that. Once you see the pattern clearly, empathy no longer blinds you. It informs you. The first strategy is awareness without self-doubt. Start noticing patterns without immediately questioning yourself. If something feels off consistently, don't dismiss it. Your perception matters, and trusting it is your first line of protection. The second strategy is emotional detachment in key moments. When you sense manipulation, pause before reacting. Emotional responses are often what the pattern feeds on. By slowing down, you regain control of your reactions instead of being pulled into theirs. The third strategy is boundary clarity. Define what is acceptable and what isn't, internally first. You don't need to argue or explain everything. Clear boundaries reduce the space where manipulation can operate. The fourth strategy is pattern recognition over isolated events. Don't judge situations individually. Look at repeated behavior over time. Manipulation is rarely a one-time event. It's a consistent pattern that reveals itself when you step back and observe. Think about a time when you walked away from a conversation feeling confused, or somehow at fault, even though you couldn't explain why. Now ask yourself this: was it a misunderstanding? Or was it a pattern you didn't recognize at the time? The most dangerous manipulation is the kind you don't see. It doesn't force control. It slowly replaces your clarity with confusion. But once you recognize the pattern, you take that control back. In our next video, we're going to expose a behavior that feels harmless on the surface, but quietly damages your emotional stability over time. If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep learning the psychology most people never get taught,